so thrilled. Today, joining me is one of my good friends, Fred freaking Cullen. He is the CEO of Green Team Junk Removal up in Massachusetts. We are going to be diving into all things Fred Cullen, where he grew up, his amazing wife, Julia, who I am very good friends with. We are going to be talking about starting your own business. So you guys might learn some tips and tricks from him. The fact that he started off his career in corrections and so much more. You guys are going to find this episode super insightful and very interesting. But before we welcome in Fred, we are going to have a two-part podcast episode with him. And also, I hope you guys enjoyed my two-part special with former Boston Red Sox media icon Jenny Dell. If you guys have not listened to that episode yet, please go ahead and do so. It is available both on iTunes and Spotify. You guys know that I drop about 4 new episodes every month. Free to listen, free to subscribe. Again, up on iTunes and Spotify. Leave me a nice review. It helps me create some more fantastic content for all of my BosBabes fanatics. Let's kick right into it. My good friend, Fred Cullen, is the founder of Green Team Junk Removal. It's an eco-friendly junk removal company out of Massachusetts. As I've mentioned, he and his wife are good friends with both Ryan and I, and they're actually going to be coming to our wedding day, which I am super excited about. Fred, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well, Brittany. Thank you for having me on your show today. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, I am thrilled to have you on here. I've been trying to get Fred on this podcast for a couple months now, but the man is busy. He's got family. He's running his own business. He has a lot going on. Before we even jump into who you are and how you started your own business, I want my BosBabes fanatics to get to know you on a deeper, more personal level. Let's chat about your spring. How's your spring going so far? And are you spending a lot of time with your kids and Julia, your wife?
Actually, our spring is going very well. I love the fact that there's no snow on the ground right now. Thank God. I could stay in the western part of the state. Our spring, I'm trying to spend as much time with my girls and Julia as much as possible. We are hitting our busy months, so we go pretty busy from April to November. So as much time as I can get to spend with them during that time, I try to make it happen.
So let's break the ice a little bit. Fred,
Yep.
if you had a superpower, what would it be and why?
Oh man. I would actually I'd like to be invisible. I think the reason being I would like to just watch others and watch how they interact, and I think it's an amazing power to be just invisible, and and spook people out too. I'll get a kick with that.
That's a good answer. I feel like your kids would find it interesting if you just like randomly popped up behind them, like while they're doing their homework. Hey, dad's here. Or like when they first start dating and you like show up at their date, they don't know about it. And if the guy is acting up in the wrong way, you're kind of like, hey, I don't think you guys should be dating this person. And they're like, wait, dad, why? And you're like, you'll never know. Woo!
Hey, Brittany, we're only about 4 minutes into your show and you're already putting nightmares in my head. Oh man, I'm not ready for that. Now, thank God they're 11 and 6. I'm not ready for them to start dating. Oh,
I know. I just wanted to throw it out there because I just thought it would be cute to bring up. But yes,
yeah,
Fred actually
definitely.
has 2 really adorable girls. They're young, so obviously they're not dating yet, but I just wanted to poke some fun at it because I know when I started to get into my preteen years, my dad was always like, make sure you're dating the right people. And I feel like if he was able to go invisible and kind of sneak up on me once in a while and make sure that the guy's not acting up in the wrong way, he probably would have done it too. So Fred, you had an excellent answer, and that's a great way to break the ice. Your early years, where did you grow up? I know that you spent a good chunk of time when you were younger in New York. And what was your life like?
All right. So yeah, my younger years, I grew up with my grandmother. Down in Brooklyn Heights. I was in Brooklyn till the age of 11. I guess you could say I had a rough upbringing. My parents, my father was a war veteran, and then my mother, She had some issues herself with substance abuse and mental health there, so they weren't able to raise me. So I was raised with my grandmother. She did her best, you know. We were down in Brooklyn Heights, but I you know I didn't really have a father figure until like my later years when my uncle took over. So I'd say my earlier years, you know, I was a little mischief kid, you know, just in the streets doing stupid things. My grandmother, she was getting older, so you know, and I just wasn't. I was a very hard kid to raise because you know, no, I really didn't have stability. I didn't have a father figure or a mother figure to have that strong parent influence on me. So I pretty much was running the mill, you know, with my grandmother at a very young age. I was going down a wrong path. It was a horrible path. I probably, if I didn't move out of the city when I was around 11 and go with my uncle, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I would probably be in and out of jail, stealing. So I was a kid that stole a lot when I was younger. I was getting in trouble a lot. My grades were F's. F's. I actually remember this is now we're going late 80s. So when I would go into my parent teachers meetings, you know, my grandmother would be there, and the teachers, they would basically just give me the D's just to pass me on. And until I got to Jersey, you know, for when I turned 11, my life was just I was in and out of the streets, just being stupid, stealing money, stealing whatever I could. 11 years old is really kind of where my life kind of turned around when I made that move.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I know it's sometimes hard to open up and be vulnerable, but that's what this podcast is all about, being real, being raw. And Fred has been that way with both Ryan and I since day one. And I love the fact that he's opening up about his childhood and he's not trying to sugarcoat things. And I've had people on this podcast open up about their childhood, myself included. I didn't have a childhood full of ponies and candy as well. We all have those hardships, and I feel like those hardships make us who we are today. And it's interesting because again, stick with us. You're hearing Fred talk about these hardships and how it was as a child going through not having a father figure, growing up in a big city where it's he has
Oh,
maybe friends that are enticing him to steal money and do other bad things, but as you stick with
that's actually it's kind of funny you say that, Brittany. It was that I was more of a follower because I wasn't really when you're in broken home, if you don't have that person that's a great role model for you, you know, and you're basically, if you really think about it, I was given to my grandmother. My grandmother raised me the best, but she was already almost 70 years old. So here's a 70-year-old woman. Well, I would say mid 60s. Here's a woman in her mid 60s trying to raise a kid from a baby, you know, and she was a tough woman, but there's really there was nothing there, you know. She tried her best to discipline, but and so I basically, you know, followed the crowd, and that's what led down that path, you know, of just I I would get thrown out of class daily, absolutely daily. I would turn around and just run off with the mouth just because I wanted the attention, you know, or people were like, hey, you know, do this, do that. And it made me feel like, oh man, you know what? I got somebody that you think they care about you because, you know, when you're a fan, no one, you got your grandmother, but no one else, you know. So you thought these people cared. So I'd follow down the road with them. And, you know, God has blessed me. God has watched over me, you know, and he got me out of a bad situation.
and again, I applaud you for opening up about it because I feel like a lot of my Boss Babes fanatics will resonate with this story because what I was going to get into was Fred is opening up about his tough times as a kid, and I will sit here wholeheartedly, and not that I knew him when he was younger, of course, but if you knew him or you know him now in the present, you look at his Facebook posts, every morning he has something motivational and something positive. You would have never known that back in the day he had these hardships. Also, he started his own business and his own company. He spent a good chunk of his career in corrections. So for me, I feel like given the, for lack of a better word, bad cards that he was dealt as a kid, I don't think Fred would take that away from his upbringing. And the reason why I say that after knowing him for these last 2 years, that, in my opinion, made him who the man that he is now. He's an excellent father, an excellent husband. He started his own business because he knows he doesn't want to go back to those types of roots. And on top of that, and you'll hear him talk about getting into the corrections career later on in this episode, but I'm sure he will tell you guys what he witnessed in corrections and why he probably didn't want to end up behind bars himself. So, Fred, thank you for opening up about that. Let's talk a little bit more about your grandmother. She sounds like a fabulous woman. I'm not sure if she's still Earthside or not, but while she was here, or if she is still here, what types of foods did she make for you when you were younger? And how did you resonate with her growing up?
My grandmother was a great woman. Obviously, I was her grandson, so when it came to foods, she used to spoil me all the time. All the time. Whatever I wanted, I would get. You know, so I had like pancakes. If I wanted a breakfast, I'm being real. I get pancakes, eggs, cereal. You know, I was fat when I was younger. Not gonna lie, I had the belly going. You know, I actually sprouted to my height at like age 12. When I lived with her, she fed me well. What I loved, you know what? One of my favorite things, I love my boiled hot dogs with sauerkraut. That was one of my favorite things she gave me.
Boiled hot dogs and sauerkraut, and it leads into the fact that you're a big sports lover, which we'll get into. I don't know if you eat hot dogs when you go to baseball games, but I loved me some hot dogs too when I was younger, and of course I love Fenway Franks.
Hey, I love Fenway Franks and I love Fenway Park. Even being a New Yorker, I switch and I love the Red Sox 100%. But tell you how sports has really influenced my life. When I went over to New Jersey, I played basketball in New York. Basketball in New York and New Jersey is, I find it to be more aggressive when you're on the court. So when I came up here to play in college, I just didn't. I don't know. There was a sense of the difference on the court I could feel. But we were Division III. Division I, obviously, the intensity is pretty compatible. But I found New York and New Jersey ball is much different than playing in Massachusetts. When I made my move to Jersey, at 6 feet, okay, for a turning 12, okay, and this time you're talking about like 96, 97. That was pretty height. That was pretty tall back then. You know, now you have kids that are 6'3", 6'4", and that's average. In the early 90s, I was able to jump on an AAU team, and the AAU team was called the Central Jersey Express, and it was a bunch of us. We all played together in different leagues, but normally it was actually, the team was really comprised of the top 2 or 3 best players of pretty much every high school, okay, within surrounding Mercer County. I was not one of the best, but I was lucky to be friends with the kids and the coaches, so that got me a seat on this team. When I got on this team for now we were 12 years old, okay, and we did this from 12 to 15. We always came in third in the AAU championships for New Jersey, third. And it was always a war between us, Jersey Shore Warriors, okay, and the Hawks, Central Jersey Hawks. And why I'm saying that, why I'm trying to say this is a very impressive story, was because we were just compiled of just, if you looked at us, we were kids that were undersized, undermanned, okay, but we just had a toughness about us. And Jersey Shore Warriors and Central Jersey Hawks, they were all the players that at the time that would go off and play in Division I basketball. And we're not talking about the lower Division I schools. We're talking about the Dukes, the North Carolinas. If you look at those programs, okay, and you look at someone where the alumni have gone on to play, I have a very impressive resume of who I've had the opportunity to play against. And we're even talking about people that have been in the NBA. And during that time, okay, I got to see sports in the business world really come together, because when I was playing in the 90s, all right, the big brands started taking over these teams. So if I was in the stages of if we wanted to play for an Adidas sponsored team, you start to see the kids that went off to the Adidas schools. They would start forming for the teams. The same thing with Nike, the same thing with Converse, because Converse was just coming back when this was all starting to form. So I got to play against some of the names. Tyson Chandler. You know Tyson Chandler?
I am not familiar with Tyson Chandler, but you can go ahead and speak about him if you wish.
Tyson Chandler, phenomenal career. He played for the Knicks, New Orleans Hornets. If you take a look at his, you'll see that he's done amazing work in the NBA. So we wound up playing him, the Southern Cal All-Stars. We wound up playing them in Tennessee. So I got to actually travel with this team, and we played against some of the top basketball players of our age back then that made it to the NBA. Basketball for me was really my savior, and I was a kid I was a troubled youth kid. I gravitated towards basketball. I wasn't the number one guy, okay? But I was definitely, I can tell you right now, my ego will tell you I was definitely enough to earn a seat on the bench. And it helped me get through high school. I got to play for one of the premier high schools in New Jersey, Notre Dame High School. And it took me to play in college. I played up here in Mount Ida, and basketball pretty much saved me. You have a lot of athletes that come on your show, that have had careers beyond college that have been great. You've had Hall of Famers on your show, But for me, for what sports have done for me, it took me from being a kid that could have been in jail, in and out of jail for the rest of his life, as able to give him the stability, the fundamentals to be able to live a life, be able to raise a family, and to be able to own a business because of the discipline of my coaches and then the discipline of my uncle coming into my life and being able to give me that stability. But basketball was really, a saving grace for me. And that's why I like to do a lot of my charity work with my company. That's why, we're going to talk about it. I ran the prison league, and why that prison league meant so much more to me than just a basketball league, because I was a troubled youth. And now here I am running a league, for the individuals that I personally could have been, and I felt that it was a great time running that league.
Well, Fred, thank you again for opening up and sharing so much about your youth so far. I know for a fact that my BosBabes fanatics are going to find this episode or this part 2 special to be very inspirational, which is why I'm going to bring this topic up. Back in the day, I said to Fred, you need to come on the podcast. And he was like, Britt, but it's a lifestyle sports podcast. You've had on Hall of Famers and athletes and reality TV competitors. I'm like, yes, I have. But to be able to have a friend of mine on this podcast that, one, is not only a close friend of mine, two, has an inspirational story, three, does charity work, which a big portion of my podcast is about that, and four, I don't know if you guys know this, you hear his advertisements all the time on this podcast weekly. He's actually a freaking sponsor of this podcast. And without him, I would not be able to be giving you guys this fantastic content. So thank you for that. But the fact that you are on here opening up, and I loved that you just mentioned that basketball helped you as a kid, dug you out almost from the grave of ending up possibly in jail, and kind of gave you that foundation for the man that you are now. Let's hop right into it. I know that you just mentioned Mount Ida College. If you want to talk a little bit more about college basketball, please go ahead and do so. And then I want to talk about that prison league that you helped run.
It was always a dream of mine that I wanted to play college basketball, and I think God gave me that opportunity, because I believe I always had the skill to be on the team. I knew I always had the skill to be on the team. My issue was in my head because I was off the rocker. I'm gonna tell you, you might get a good kick out of this one. My coach was like, who's your idol? And I was like, Dennis Rodman. Like Dennis Rodman was my idol back in the day. And this was when he was doing all his kind of crazy stuff. But I loved Dennis Rodman. I really did. The guy was a rebounder. So like I prided myself on just being a tough nail, tough SOB, just go out there and not take shit from anybody. If somebody was to hit my teammate, be that defender. But Mount Ida was a great time. I played 4 years. My first year, freshman year, just obviously garbage burn. My second year, I got thrown in the fire. And my good friend Matt McGoran, he was actually one of the star players for Mount Ida. Actually, very well known in Taunton. If you were to bring his name down in Taunton for basketball, he was one of the best players to come out of Taunton. Kid was unreal. So he goes down, he hurts his knee. At this time, I was averaging about 3 or 4 minutes. Okay, so now in college, it's really about your minutes, like not how much you get in, it's really about how many minutes you're getting. So, and I was a sophomore at the time, and we were just losing. And the coach turns around and goes, Fred, you're up. And I'm like, what? So like for the first time in my career, okay, here's a kid that really was, had the skill, okay, but mentally was just so, because of his childhood, was just, he wasn't there mentally to get the plays down. It was his time now. It was like, okay, my friend just went down. I'm his backup. So for that rest of that season, my minutes went from 3 to 4 minutes a game to somewhere I was up to like 17 to 18 minutes a game because of the fact that we had a lot of talent that played on Mount Ida. Mine was just getting under there, hustling, getting rebounds, and putting shots back up underneath the basket. And I had fun with it. And then my junior year and my senior year, I'm actually the first player to ever receive the Coaches Award from Mount Ida College. Even though Mount Ida no longer exists, I was the first player to ever receive that award. And that award to me really meant a lot, because my coaches knew everything what I went through, and they gave that to me at the end of my sophomore year. I didn't get that as a senior or junior. I got that as a sophomore. And that was like that was actually my highlight of my awards. And I have a lot of awards for basketball. I've been on a lot of great teams. But yeah, to get that Coaches Award as a college player, that meant a lot. Yeah, Mount Ida was a lot of fun, a lot of traveling, a lot of great experiences. We got to run with we had close relationship at the time with Dennis Wolf and BU. So we got to go down and scrimmage with BU sometimes. We actually had Jim O'Brien, who was the Ohio State basketball coach. His coach, him and my coach, Rico Cabral, they were really close, and they coached at Boston College together. So Jim would be coming down when he was going through. I don't know if I could really, it's been years. So, and I know he's all settled out. When he was going through his stuff over at Ohio State, he was at our practices yelling at us. So for a little bit of a time, I was getting chewed out by Jim O'Brien. So, we were doing Division I practices. So that was a lot of fun. Sports, I just feel, just in life in general, if you're ever by somebody that is just, they have so much knowledge of a subject that you want to get into, and if they're open to, you want to talk to that person, you want to pick their brain, like, man, how do you do this? How do you do that? Because when I think that's a gift from God at times. When God puts different people in your lives, you should take advantage of that.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I love the fact that basketball was sort of a fun and positive escape from your life's hardships as a kid. And the fact that you, as you mentioned, got to work with all these coaches, got to work alongside some top talent. And I love the fact that Dennis Rodman was your idol back in the day. And I'm not just saying this, Fred, because I have you on here, but do you want to know what one of my Christmas gifts was to Ryan this past year?
Oh man, tell me a Dennis Rodman t-shirt.
an autographed, custom painted Dennis Rodman basketball. That was one of his Christmas gifts from me because I myself love Dennis Rodman, and Ryan and I both really enjoyed watching. You probably watched it. I think it was like 6 or 7 series. It was like that docu-series that dropped back in 2020 during the
Yep.
COVID situation. It was all about the 1990 Chicago Bulls, and more so
Yep.
about Michael Jordan, but Dennis Rodman made an appearance on it. Did you watch it?
Oh, I watched it. Absolutely. Absolutely. That was my time of basketball. No, that was it for me. That was a mecca. I was a big John Stark. Well, Dennis Rodman, but I was a big John Starks fan from New York. I got to sit in the Garden. I watched Jordan back then when he was playing the Knicks. He scored 45. Just thinking about those times. I enjoyed basketball, and what it is now, it's completely different than what it was back then.
And that docu-series, if you guys are interested in listening, my BosBabes fanatics, if you guys want to go ahead and watch it, it is called The Last Dance. And I believe it's 6 or 7 episodes. They're about an hour long. Some episodes are a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. But the whole series is just about that 1990s dynasty of a basketball team that included Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan, Dennis Rodman, talks about some of the wacky things that Dennis Rodman did back in the day, like the crazy haircuts and putting the paint in his hair, the painted nail polish, and he was just like a really awesome, like wacky character, but he sticks out to people because here we are, it's now 2022 and people still talk about Dennis
Yeah.
Rodman, the Michael Jordans, the Scottie Pippen. I believe Scottie Pippen's son, ironically enough, also named Scottie Pippen Jr., plays college basketball now, which Fred, I'm sure you probably follow him. One day I'd like to get him on the podcast. You guys are now listening to Fred Cullen. He is the CEO of Green Team Junk Removal. Good friend of mine. You guys are listening to him in this part 1 talk all about growing up in New York, his hardships, living with his grandma, turning the negatives into a positive by going off, getting into basketball, playing at Mount Ida, crushing it, and getting highly, highly involved in the sport. And for those of you guys that are listening, I hope you listen to this episode and take it with some insightful positivity because you guys are going to hear from somebody that literally turned nothing into everything, in the sense that you are going to learn so much about his life. We are going to hop right into the fact that he helped create, I don't know if he helped create it or if he was help running it, but a sort of rec league for inmates,
Yeah.
basketball
Um,
related. And the reason why I want to talk about that is because in part 2 of this podcast, you will hear Fred talk all about his career in corrections, how he met his wife, and of course, how the freak he started Green Team Junk Removal. So, Fred, before we get into your corrections career, let's just discuss this basketball rec league for these inmates.
You know what? Yeah, it's gonna tie into my corrections career because I was an officer, but you're gonna love it. Started in corrections. I was a correctional program officer, did a lot of programming, did a lot of community corrections, worked on the work crews. 2012, I took a job. To become a recreation officer for the Department of Corrections, and they now I live in Holliston. I'm not far from Walpole. It was like a 15-minute ride. I'm thinking, oh, they're gonna keep me home. So my pick comes and they go, oh, we're sending you to Shirley. And I turn around, I'm like, what? You're sending me 60 miles away from my house when there's a prison right down 15 minutes from my house? And they said, welcome to the state. That's how it works. So I was a little salty about that. I was really, I was mad. So my attitude wasn't really the best driving up there. So this opportunity came along, and I took the job. I was like, you know what? It's rec, it's sports. I think it's something I'm going to enjoy. And I get up there, and my boss, who's been a rec officer for a long time, says, "What sports are you? What have you done in your career? How far have you gone?" I said, "Oh, I played basketball." Told him, played for Mount Ida, and he goes like this: "You're gonna run the basketball league?" I said, "Excuse me?" He goes, "Yeah, yeah." He goes, "We need some fresh blood around here in the basketball league, and you're gonna go ahead and I think I'm gonna assign it to you. And I turned around. It's like I said, really? He goes, yeah. I'm like, awesome. I'm like, all right, yeah, give me the paperwork, you know. So I take the paperwork, and now when I came into the camp, Shirley Medium is the #1 gang prison in the state. At that time, it was. It probably still is. But if you were a gang member, they were throwing you to Shirley Medium, and you know, that's where they were going. And the inmates, believe it or not, you know, it's their league. So in their minds, they run the league. You know, a cop's not going to come in and take over. So the way it works is they got a commissioner, which is you know, an inmate. Then you have your referees that are all inmates, and you have your scorekeepers. So everything is really run by inmates. But what's funny about it is when it comes to the referees, okay, in the prison life, it's Boston, Springfield, Worcester, and then you have so if you're from Boston, you run with the Boston kids. If you run from Worcester or you're around Worcester, you run with the Worcester guys. And if you're from Springfield, you run from the Springfield. That's how it's divided up in prison. You know, I'm not. And you got races, but that's the small way of doing it, and it's all gang territory. Okay, so you could literally have one night the Bloods and the Vice Lords playing against each other because they're gonna run with their own boys, and then the referees, okay, are gang members as well. So the games are all set up. So you already know because people are betting. There's tons of bets going on, so you can. So they really controlled how, you know, even though it was a league, but it was also a form of gambling for them. They're making a lot of money on the side through this league. So I came in and I saw what was going on. You know, I've been around the system for a while, so you know, there were a couple of inmates in there that I knew that I was able to just go and talk to them and say, yeah, this is how it goes, blah blah blah. I said, all right, so I guess I'm going to change that all. And they just looked at me, and some of the other guys from a few of the other camps, they knew how I was, and they were like, oh shit, Fred's gonna do his thing. So I turned around and when I went to my boss, I said, I'm taking over this league and I'm gonna clean it up. And I just need you to trust me on this. And when I do this, you know guys aren't gonna be happy. And he goes, all right, Fred, go ahead and do what you have to do. So I fired everybody and I fired all the inmates. Now, an inmate job to them, it's good time and it's pay and it's time in the gym, okay? But I had to clean house because I already knew that the league wasn't fair because the gangs, they all had their hands in it. They had their hands in the refs, they had their hands in the clock, they had their hands in how I was going to portray and who was going to win the money. Me being in the system for so long, I kind of knew who the leaders were, you know. So I'd turn around and say, all right, in order for me to make this league work, okay, I'm going to have to turn around and get them to work with me somehow. So I called up to this room and I knew who all the heavies were in the prison. Now, let me tell you something. You don't get these guys in a room, okay? And I'm being honest with you. And when you do, the cameras are on you. And when I mean the cameras, the IPS, the inner perimeter security that's watching the officers, the staff, and the cons. So I called basically a meeting of all the inmate heavies into one room, you know, and I'm sitting there and I'm telling you, and I'm like, all right, this is how it's gonna go. He goes, I already know that the Italians, because you got the mob in there, they're running the money. I'm like, I already know it. So we gotta chill, we gotta stop with that. But what I'll do is I'll have you guys work the league with me. All right. You guys get the good time jobs, you guys get the, you know, the pay. Okay. We'll build this league out, we'll do it the right way. Okay. And I said, and they sent around, I said, I'm reffing the games. And they looked at me like, are you kidding me? I was like, yep. And I said, I'm going to control the refs and I'm going to hire my own refs. You guys are not going to have any say in the matter of how these games are going to be officiated. And if you think you're going to try to turn around and they knew me, they knew that if they tried anything with me, I was going to lock them up right there and then. So it was that level of respect, though. You know, when you deal with those guys, you treat them with respect, they'll treat you with respect, but they know not to cross that line. And we also know as officers, don't cross that line with them because they can easily turn around and act and have the prison act up very fast. You know, them being a leader, they have a lot of influence over the inmate population. So we put a plan together. I actually jumped in. I trained all the referees. I refed a lot of those games. So there was so much that went on into actually creating this league because of the fact that when you're dealing with a population like that, okay, dominance is number one. Dominance. When you're in a situation, everybody wants to be dominant, and everybody wants to figure out how can they turn around and show power. And I mean that with the inmates, because for them, if the Latin Kings are playing for that game, and they're playing against the East Street, if they're playing against the Springfield game, they want to make sure, the Latin Kings want to win. There's power, it's dominance for them. So what are they going to do to go ahead and make sure that happens? So there was always side deals going on. And I was able to come in and squash that for 4 years. Very successful. We ran championships. We did a summer league. We did a winter league. And I treated even though I was an officer, they knew it. I mean, it's funny because I could be reffing their games, and at 4:30 it ends. Then I'm up in the chow hall, a fight kicks out, and then I'm slamming one of the guys on the ground and cuffing him, because and they had that level to understand that, he's out there reffing, putting that program on for us, but at the end of the day, he's also an officer. So I did get a lot of respect from the cons, and I don't mean that as I was not a con lover. I was not a con lover at all. I was very by the book. This is how it's going to be, but I was fair. And I did it because, again, I was a troubled youth kid. I kind of could relate to a lot of the guys there. I really could. I loved it because it was funny, because you had Division II, not many Division I guys, but you had a lot of guys that could play Division II, a lot of guys that could play Division III, and then you had the guys that just couldn't play, that just ran their mouths, and those guys were just hysterical. Because they would run their mouth, they'd be so bad that you didn't, and then they would get mad at me, right, for calling a call, but I wouldn't even have to yell back, because the other inmates would turn around and be like, "Yeah, you're a fool, man. He called the right call, and you're just horrible." So for me, it was I had a good laugh with it, but we took it seriously, and it was able to give the cons, the inmates, a great, a good experience for, the time that they had in there, for the 2 hours that it took. You're probably like, "Oh man, how can you allow people to gamble in prison?" Prison's another world. It really is. You have to pick and choose your battles. So at the end of the day, when I looked at it and I said, "Yeah, do we really come in and really stop the corruption of the games?" That, yes, we did. Did we stop the gambling? Absolutely not. But we were able to stop the corruption and make it an actual league, to where teams that were making the playoffs, that were good, they weren't making it because they were getting set up. So we really cleaned the league up. It does kind of create that atmosphere, because you want to create, in some ways, an environment for these guys on a Friday night. They're all locked in, and these guys kill people. They have no problem killing you. They're already in there for life killing. So if they're going to gamble stamps or something, and they're having a good time watching a basketball game for 2 hours, and the officers are able to lay back, and not have to really worry about any fights or anything, and it's putting on a positive climate, then hell, what's gambling 5 stamps? What at the end of the day, it's not really a big deal. So, like I said, you gotta, when you're in a prison, you got to be able to work with each other. If you come in with an iron fist, they're just going to turn around and say, "You know what? We're going to make your 8 hours a very long 8 hours." I was fair, but I wanted it to work well for everybody.
Well, Fred, thank you for sharing all that. I found that to be very interesting and knowledgeable. For those of you guys that are listening, I don't even know if you know this. Fred and I connected talking about this topic during the winter, because both he and I have a background in sociology, psychology, criminology, where I obviously did not work in corrections, but growing up and coming into college, I went to Suffolk University. My degree is actually in psychology and sociology. And before I got into media and entertainment, as I am in now, of course, I used to study criminal behavior, and I actually wanted to be a criminal psychologist. I wanted to actually work in prisons. So back in the day, I could have easily ended up or crossed paths with Fred, either at a corrections facility or at a courthouse because a lot of those types of people work hand in hand together. I want to wrap up this part 1 podcast episode with Fred. He was freaking fantastic. I fully enjoyed having him on here. You guys can feel free to stay tuned. We will be dropping part 2 of this episode, so stay with us. You guys rock. See you next time.